Hi, friends. I'm Olivia. This is AV Club, where I talk about horror, lit fic, weird books, whatever I want to talk about. And today I'm talking about everything that I read in September. September, I was mostly reading short books for Shorty September, but it was also kind of a weird reading month. If you are new here, welcome. But I've previously talked about like September, I had a break in right before I was about to host reading sprints for Shorty September at like 2 in the morning because I was doing it for UK people. And yeah, high key, one of the most traumatic things that's ever happened to me. So where I was reading like a book a day before it happened, my September reading plans were changed. Like I couldn't concentrate on reading, and it's just been a hard time for me. Doing better, but yeah, kind of a weird month because of that. But I did finish some to most of my Shorty September TBR. There's some things that I partially read, just because, the headspace that I was in, but I didn't want it to go too long. And I think it'll be kind of healing for me to talk about the books that I read during that time because I've otherwise not wanted to think about September at all. I'm just going to do these in the order that I read them. And the first book that I read for Shorty September was Puberty Blues by Gabrielle, Carey, and Kathy Letty. This is a book that is set in the 70s in Sydney, Australia, in Cronulla Beach area, and this is a book that is very, very popular in Australia. Um, I feel like, what is the equivalent? I don't know that there is an equivalent exactly because it's not like Go Ask Alice or something like that. Like it's not um like these girls are like 13 and doing it's not that they're doing bad stuff, but you feel like people are doing bad stuff around them and they're in a very vulnerable position. They are like the girlfriends associated with the surfies of Cronulla Beach, and these guys are much older than them. They are just like trying to grow up fast. This was actually written by these two girls, not the two girls in the picture. I think that's from like the movie or TV adaptation. And they wrote it while they were still teenagers about like what their experience had been like when they were like 13. So it is kind of like, I can't think of anything that would be like a direct American equivalent, but it is like a book that is like very beloved or very foundational for a lot of people. Like one of the blurbs on the back is from Kylie Minogue. So I think that maybe the TV series is like a more romanticized version, but like it's like kind of hard to read but fun. It definitely, I've never read anything from like a young female perspective from like an earlier time. And not that like there's not still misogyny in Australia, but yeah, definitely harder to read, and the way that they were treated like so disposably. They're also not being judgmental about the type of social atmosphere they're growing up in. I mean, they are also being misogynist towards like other girls and slut shaming and all that kind of stuff. So it's like very interesting window into a time period in Australia that I hadn't read before. And hard to say like fun, but it was like very quick read. Like I read it in one sitting. So yeah, a good time. I recommend it, especially for something like Shorty September. The next book that I read was The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes, which I had an okay time with. It is like an interesting premise. I was supposed to watch the movie with this as well, but like I said, things happened. It's from the perspective of this man who is older, retired, had this full life, but is like looking back on his time at school and the friendships that he had, new people who came into their lives, going from like a high school to university setting, and being able to make sense of what actually had been going on, both with him, his friends, his girlfriend, their families at the time. And it is kind of set up like it's a mystery, like that there is like some kernel of truth to uncover. And I feel like it expected you to be gagged at the end, but I just feel like it was like I knew where it was going. I feel like some of its enjoyment, it planned for it to be like uncovering the mystery, and that just didn't really do it for me. But it was like, objectively well written. The characters were interesting, dialogue great. And so yeah, gave it 3 stars. I think there's like pretty mid reviews of the movie, but I am still interested in watching it and seeing how they were able to handle the kind of like fraught relationships, as well as like how they handled him ignoring what he was saying at the time or ignoring his own actions at the time. The next book that I read was The Comfy Cozy Witch's Guide to Making Magic in Your Everyday Life by Jennie Blonde, who I guess hosts a podcast of a similar name that's very popular. And this appealed to me because she was talking about like how to include witchcraft or something adjacent magical practices into your life, even if you are not following a religion. And I just feel like I would love to have community who has like similar beliefs to me, but I'm not Wiccan. Like I don't have any formal beliefs, but I do, care deeply about nature and animals, and I do feel like some kind of like vague spiritual thing that I would love if there was like a name to put on it, but like nothing really makes sense to me, and I hate following rules. But anyway, the introduction to this book like says it's for people like she got into doing this because she started making her podcast because she wasn't Wiccan, but and didn't want to follow any rules either, which I was intrigued. But then I don't really understand, and if anyone can explain this to me, would love to know, because it's like this is for people who not don't want to follow any rules. But then like the examples of things to do in the book to include magic in your life is like, yeah, you have to use this herb and stir your tea 3 times and it will give you this trait. And I'm just like, says who? Like, says who? I don't understand why you have to follow these rules and that there is like truth in this if you're also not following a religion. Do you know what I mean? Like, I understand, like, if it's like the Wiccan belief is that if you do this, then this. But if you're saying that that's not your belief and you're just kind of like making changes willy-nilly, I just don't understand. I don't understand. Why does everything have to be so regimented? But I did like how it helped me reflect on seasonal practices. I feel like that's one thing since I've moved to Australia has been kind of challenging to me, just because there are just pagan practices laid on top of Christian holidays in the US. Like, you do pagan things for Halloween, for Christmas, for Easter. Like, even if you're not a Christian, like, you're doing all of these, like, the lighting of candles and the jack-o'-lanterns and all that kind of stuff are pagan practices. And that's not here, like, or the seasons are swapped here. And so thinking about like, well, what could be important to me to honor the passage of time, to honor the seasons, and just have gratitude for the season that I'm living in, rather than being so locked in like the American mindset of how to celebrate holidays. So I did have it wasn't all a waste is what I'm saying. But no, I'm not any closer to being a witch because I don't understand. I don't understand, where did these rules come from? What happens if you break them? I don't know. Don't know. It would not be a Shorty September or a short book reading experience without reading another one from Annie Ernaux. And this time I read The Young Man, which is just about her affair with a young man. And my review was really like, I would have liked this a lot less if it wasn't coming from her. But I love listening to all of her affairs. Like, if it was anyone else, I'd be like, girl, I don't care. I don't care. But she's just like such a good writer. So yeah, sure. Give me all of the inside scoop. It was just like hot goss. I love when Annie Ernaux dishes. The next one I think was like my favorite of the month, and that was Vampirocene by Merritt K. This is one that I read. You can only buy off of itch.io, I believe. This was fun. This was a vampire novella that was taken in a brand new direction and had climate change, leftist political New York City kind of elements to it. And the idea is that vampires care a lot more about climate change than humans because they will experience the issues associated with it a lot more in their lifespans because their lifespans are so much longer. So in this one, they live in New York City. Vampires are real. They're still vampires. They are taking on climate change one way or another. And might they be a little bit evil? Who knows? This was really fun, and I highly recommend it, even if you're not a horror reader, if you're more of like a lit fic. It is very New York City leftist podcast type sensibilities into what it's describing, what it expects you to already know and come into with the expectations that you are like aware of Twitter history, I guess. I don't know. But I am, so I had a good time. Next one, kind of a dud for me, but Invisible Kitties by Yoyo, translated by Jeremy Chang. And this was, I thought, going to be a win for me because it's about cats and it's like a reference to Calvino's Invisible Cities in the title. But it was just like, I feel like there is a lot of like cat lit lately that is just describing cats, and it's like, I understand because I love my cats, but there's only so long that I can really care. It's not really doing anything cozy for me. This wasn't um also inventive or weird enough to feel like I could recommend it on that level. Just not something that really stuck with me even while I was reading it. And like I should have just DNF'd it, but you know, we live and we learn. The next one was one that I read during my reading sprints, and that's Life on the Refrigerator Door by Alice Kuipers. And this one was a very interesting form. I found this at the Book Barn. I'd never heard about it before, but it's just notes that are being told to a mother and daughter through like notes on a refrigerator door. So everything is like, short and sweet, was great for reading sprints. But it is a YA novel. I think almost like middle grade, but it's almost like YA before YA was a real marketing term or a big book market at all. I don't know if any of y'all were teens or preteens like during this like pre-YA time, but at the library there would just be a book called Teenagers or Teens because YA was like not a thing yet, and it reminds me of the books that would be in there then. It would be like one tiny little shelf of stuff that is like kind of moralizing. It's like what an adult would want a teen to take away. How could you love your mother more? How could you respect your mother more as a person? So not very believable from like the teen. The mom doesn't really have to like learn to respect what the teen is caring about. It's really more like you should love your mom while you have her, which is something I truly believe, but it's just like it feels like a morality tale about you didn't appreciate your mom enough and now aren't you sad about it. So I wouldn't recommend reading this, but if you're around, if you're stuck in a waiting room with it, you could finish it very quickly, and then you could talk about it with me. So, um, still happy I read it. Like it's a fun thing to. It's like a piece of book history, not a lauded piece of book history, but one. The next one was a DNF for me, the Book Censor's Library, and I DNF'd it at 50%, so I was pretty far into it. But I said it was like the Memory Police meets Alice in Wonderland. There's nothing that was like wrong with it, but it just wasn't doing anything new for me. It was told in a very detached style where the characters didn't even have any names, and it was just a little bit too far away. If I hadn't read The Memory Police and a lot of other books like it, then I think that I could have liked this more, but really it was about like a world where there's a lot of censorship, and like if the books have any of these traits in it, then they get sent to the book censors. And it's about this guy working there. His daughter maybe wants to read some books that are too imaginative, and there's like this Alice in Wonderland like quality to it of mystical things happening. Other people really like it, but it just wasn't doing anything for me, and it was like bringing me down. So then I read Pen Pal by Dathan Auerbach, which was, you know what? I gave this 3 stars, but I do think that despite it being kind of like 3 stars in writing style for me, that it was interesting. It's about like these two best friend young boys, and as they're growing up, like there is weird stuff happening with one of them where there appears to be a man with a vested interest in him, and just like that maybe there's like someone stalking him and someone a little bit too close to him after they have like this pen pal exchange at school where they send out a balloon into the world with like their school address of like how to contact back to them. Like they're trying to see like where did all of their balloons end up and how far away are you. Send a picture of where you're at, and we'll add it to this board at school. Whenever he finally does receive a mail back with a picture, it's like this blurry picture. um Eventually they, this is light spoilers I guess, but they eventually realize like they're all pictures of this boy, and they've gotten so many of them, and so there's like a lot of like creepy stuff like that, and it feels like maybe sometimes he's in their house, that he's watching them in the woods. There is like that sense of things, and it is told by how things felt to like a young child, which is an interesting perspective. So I did like it. I liked it the whole time I was reading it. So I think if you're interested in like short horror, like this one's fun. But yeah, just kind of like a creepy little experience. Liked it. Liked it, but didn't love it. Another one I read was Set My Heart on Fire by Izumi Suzuki. This is, I think, her first novel. She only has one novel and like 2 short story collections that at least have been translated into English. This one I liked, although it was more just for the experience of reading kind of this like transgressive woman during the 70s in Tokyo. And it was more that I liked it because of how novel it was to be a woman in that time writing in this way and doing these things and feeling these feelings, rather than it being like if it had been written now and just like the same story, I wouldn't have liked it as much. But I think like historically it feels like really powerful. And yeah, I have one of her short story collections too, and I feel like people are more positive about those, but I did really like this. But it is like really like sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of vibes, kind of grimy. I liked it. I liked hanging out with her. It is a novel, but it's like very autobiographical. Like it follows her own life pretty strongly. The next one I read was an arc, and that was Shiny Happy People by Clay McLeod Chapman. I'll be talking about this one soon in like a new horror releases book, because this actually comes out in the first couple of weeks of November. But this is Clay McLeod Chapman's like first YA book, and I've loved everything by him that I've read previously. So even though it's YA, which is not my usual thing, I was still interested. This one was good. Like I feel like he writes female characters convincingly and wrote this teen character convincingly. I do think it's very appropriately labeled YA because it is like about this young girl and her experiences at high school, where people around her have started taking this new drug and now they're so happy, and it's about like toxic positivity and groupthink and big pharma. And I think that the most questionable part of it, just because I don't have personal experience with it and haven't really read a lot of narratives with this experience, is that the main character is adopted, and I wasn't quite sure how I felt about like how it was like talking about both like her biological versus like her adoptive family, and how someone who was adopted would feel about those things. Like that's the only like caveat I have with if it otherwise sounds like a good book to you, that if that's like a sensitive topic, like I would love to hear from someone who is adopted and to see what their perspective on that was. But I do feel like the way that it told the horror of this story about like this drug, it kind of felt like Talk to Me, like where they were filming these people like having these like big experiences on this drug on Snapchat. I do feel like it was a little bit more YA because the themes were a little bit more clear in this, whereas like I feel like Clay McLeod Chapman, one thing I like about him is that he doesn't feel like he has to lay out all of the themes for you, but it makes sense whenever it's a YA story and kind of just telling like this high school story that it would be more straightforward. However, I do feel like the plot wasn't as straightforward as you might think. That whenever they were like, this whole high school is like addicted to this drug, like very early on in the book, I'm like, where else is this gonna go? And it does keep evolving. And there are definitely weird horror sequences that happen, like probably some of his weirdest body horror and kind of upsetting imagery, so it doesn't skimp on that at all. But I feel like as far as like the setting and the themes, um, it makes sense to label it more as YA and not to try to make this story an adult story. The next one I read was a new horror release, The Whistler by Nick Medina, and this one was actually set close to home for me, or close to my old home. It's set in central Louisiana on a reservation. Henry is a up and coming ghost hunter, and he is like filming these things online, on uploading them to YouTube, like going to haunted places, and he's just on the cusp of getting fame, starting to go viral whenever he's in an accident and becomes paralyzed. And a lot of this book is about his experience as a paralyzed man, about feeling anxiety or inadequacy, about how he is able to show up for people, what they expect of him, how they're interpreting him now. And it's based a lot around this mythology that is part of several tribes' mythologies, beliefs, about not whistling at night, about that being somehow cursed. And so there is this like repetitive thread of hearing the whistling. I listened to an audiobook, which I think was like probably the best way to go, because it is like weird to be listening to the book and then all of a sudden hear the whistle. It is creepy. Overall, like I think it was like kind of an average book for me, not one that I'll be like heavily recommending, but I'm interested in reading more from Nick Medina. But it wasn't quite so horror heavy as I was expecting, or quite so spooky as I was expecting. It was definitely mostly about just like his experience as a disabled person, and that internal monologue. Maybe my only real lit fic finish for the month was Happiness and Love by Zoe Dubno, which I liked a lot. It's following a young woman, also in New York, over the course of one night at a dinner party. And she has just come back into this social scene, like artsy social scene, after being out of town. And one of their friends has died, and the relationships between these people unfold throughout the night, that you're hearing both like her reminiscing about previous experiences with each of these characters, and the judgments that we put on others, in judging people for judging other people. There's layers of judging, and for me it was just like, yeah, sometimes it really is like that. I feel this gut reaction towards this person, and then realizing, no, that was actually about me and not anything that they did, and vice versa. So there, this is definitely a social novel, about relationships and about pretentious people, about judgmental people, about classist people. I think that this would not be for everyone, because I think that if you don't want to spend a lot of time with unlikable people, all of these characters are unlikable in some way or another. So, but I had a lot of fun, and I always love a book set in New York. And then the last book that I finished of the month, oh, So good. The October Film Haunt by Michael Wehunt. I did a full review of this, so I can link that below. But yeah, this one was so good. It's like Twin Peaks, found footage, cursed technology, social media, kind of like The Whistler in that it was about someone who was famous for horror, for having a horror blog. When there is a movie that they become attached to, it's like this group of friends who are running this horror blog and proof of demons, and they kind of come up with their own like urban legends about it, and it really goes too far. Like it becomes like a Slender Man type of character that becomes larger than life and like outside of the fiction of it. And this one, like, it just was so creepy, so well done, so literary. I just love this so much. It felt so real that there were like these like real demons that were not associated with the church. They were very secular demons. There's real evil lurking in the world kind of thing. And like it really had that spiritual element to it that was like so well done. And then it seems like maybe some ne'er-do-wells are trying to make a sequel to this movie, and maybe it's also going too far. So watch my full review if you're interested in hearing more about it, because the plot is a little bit hard to succinctly explain, I think, or like the feelings of it are hard to succinctly explain, because it's so much about like sitting with the mundane, sitting with like these like slow drawn out experiences more so than like popping through plot beats. So I loved it. It was so well done. I feel like it should be a horror classic, honestly. And then I partially finished some other things. Like I read most of The White City during a reading sprint. You can see like how close I am to the end. More than halfway through at least. And yeah, I'll talk about it whenever I do finish it, but it just like makes me sad, all the stuff that I didn't get to finish. Rashomon I had picked because I was like reading something that was not what it seemed. And I was thinking, oh, Rashomon, like the story of it is like not what it seems, because it's like all these different perspectives. And I thought I was being so clever. And so I read this, it's a short story collection. I read the Rashomon story and I was like, wait, that's not what the Rashomon movie is. And so then I was like, okay, well, they really got me. That wasn't what I expected. So then I started reading the first one, which is called In a Grove. And that is the basis for the Rashomon movie. So yeah, this book gagged me because it really was not what I expected, because I kept being like tricked over and over again. I read a few of the stories in The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. I liked this a lot more than I was expecting to, because the language is just so good. Like, I don't know that the way that the retellings are done, like, they're not like gag worthy retellings where I'm like, oh, I can't believe you did that. But the language is so good. I loved it. And I read it kind of delirious during the UK sprint that I actually got to do. Grateful to the people that were there for that one, keeping me awake. So I don't know. It was a good time, but it was all a haze to me. I read about half of Carbon Justice, which is about the scandal of Australia's biggest contribution to climate change and about the coal industry in Australia. And it's crazy how much coal and how much stuff they dig up out of the earth in Australia, and none of it stays here. It all gets sent out. So, yeah, I wasn't necessarily learning anything new, but yeah, so that I don't know if I'll finish it because it wasn't necessarily like the most revelatory reading experience. Not really like hard hitting journalism or anything, kind of just like a summation of stuff that I've read throughout the years. But anyway, that was everything that I read in September. I do feel like a weight off of my chest to like talk about September again and be thinking about that time in my life, but being able to reflect on it in a different way. So I so appreciate you being here with me. Yeah, please subscribe if you haven't already. I love having people hang out with me, talk with me in the comments, all of that. But I will be back to talk about books again very, very soon. I'll talk to you later. Bye.